Welcome to The Art of Adventure. This is episode 280 with Sir John Hargrave. The Art of Adventure is the podcast where we look at unconventional lifestyles, peak performance, human potential, entrepreneurship, and cutting-edge science. I'm your host, lead explorer and guide, Derek Loudermilk. You can find the show notes over at derekloudermilk.com. Sir John Hargrave is back on the show today for the third time, and this time he is talking about blockchain technology. John has reinvented himself from our first episode where I was interviewing him about being one of the world's greatest pranksters to our second interview where we were talking about his 21-day fast and how he hacked his mind. And now he is a thought leader in the world of blockchain. He publishes the Blockchain Market Journal, which reaches over 100,000 readers per month, and wrote a book, Blockchain for Everyone. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And he's been speaking on the blockchain circuit and just really evangelizing about this technology, which is the foundation for Bitcoin and altcoins and cryptocurrencies and lots of other technologies, from smart contracts to transparent voting. There are so many things that eventually, he says it's inevitable that blockchain will get its way into. And he said, this is the most exciting technology in our lifetimes. And that's why he's so passionate about it. And he's passionate about making it accessible to everyone, because there's this huge potential for people without banks, people in developing countries, to be able to use this technology to store their wealth and be able to do transactions around the world. There's so much potential here. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. We're going to demystify the technology and talk about its potential and how to be an early adopter, or how to join in the movement, how to get involved with blockchain. Because if it's an inevitable future, then let's understand it, let's participate, and let's use it for its highest good. All right, without further ado, here is Sir John Hargrave. John, welcome back to the podcast.
Derek, this is going to be our best interview yet.
Man, this is, so what a variety. You're one of a couple of guests who have been on the show multiple times. First time we were talking about pranking, which you had sort of retired from that. But I discovered your work and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then we were talking about fasting and mind hacking, and now we're going to be talking about blockchain. So how did you sort of go through all of these, and how did you get into blockchain? I think some background for how this pulled you in would be a good place to start.
What a long, strange trip it's been, Derek. You agree?
Yeah.
For both of us. Yeah, so I got into this new technology called blockchain through Bitcoin, which is probably the best known blockchain project out there, a digital currency called Bitcoin. And I heard about it in 2013 and I bought some. And back then it was incredibly difficult to buy Bitcoin. And my new book, Blockchain for Everyone, starts with the story of me buying Bitcoin. And I had to send a wire transfer. I had to go to my bank and send a wire transfer to Belarus, the country of Belarus, which is where they were selling this Bitcoin. And I had to fax them a copy of my driver's license, sight unseen. I had no idea who these people were. And it was nerve-wracking, to say the least. But the great irony of that was, in order to buy the Bitcoin, I had to send this international wire transfer. And the bank charged me $30 to make that wire transfer, just to send money overseas. And it took 3 days to get there. So think about that for a second, that it takes 3 days to send money to another country in an age when email is instant, right? Instagram is everything is instant, but it still is so slow and expensive and inefficient just to send money to other countries. And I realized as I was buying that Bitcoin that this is the very problem that Bitcoin will solve. is it will disrupt or disintermediate the banks and the slow movement of money. Well, that Bitcoin that I bought for $125 per Bitcoin, a few years later was worth $20,000 per Bitcoin, which is like a 18,000% return. So it's the greatest investment I've ever made. And what I wanted to do with this book, Blockchain for Everyone, was really help people understand not only what it is, but how to invest in it in a smart and sensible way.
Gotcha. So you didn't spend your initial Bitcoin like a lot of people did. Held on to it.
Yeah, I held on to it. And in fact, the way I look at it is that it should be part of an overall investment portfolio. So if you think of like any financial advisor is probably telling you invest in stocks and bonds, what we say is, but also carve out a small portion of that. Think of it as your mad money or your alternative investments and put that into these new blockchain assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Ripple and some of these other so-called cryptocurrencies or altcoins, and hold on to them as part of an overall investment portfolio. And if you'd done that just 4 years ago, your portfolio would have quadrupled in value, even if you would only put like 5 or 10% into these new blockchain-based assets.
So I was about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I guess, living in Bali, and some people were starting to talk about Bitcoin, and they said you should become an early adopter. You should get some. And I was like, okay. So I bought a few $100s worth. There was like a kiosk. You could just put your credit card or cash in and in the middle of the jungle. And so they said, it's like currency. You can just spend it. So there was a couple of places around town where you could buy meals with your blockchain wallet. And so I spent all my money all my Bitcoin over the next couple of months, because no one said like you should hold on to it. It may go up in value. So who knows how much I would have had if I held on to it. But I was just using it kind of like I thought it was supposed to be. Like it's just a currency. You use it to exchange for things. So why are some people holding on to it as an investment versus actually using it to pay people for things on the other hand?
Well, I've heard many stories like yours, Derek, and you didn't do anything wrong. That was how Bitcoin was originally proposed, was a digital money. And again, a money that we could send as fast and easily as we send email today. And my favorite story on this, again, I tell this in the book, is the very first purchase made using Bitcoin was these two guys decided to buy a couple of pizzas. So this was the early Bitcoin community. It started out as this kind of this group of freaks and geeks who communicated on these early message boards, and they were kind of trading this digital currency, and it was still very much hypothetical. No one knew if it was going to catch on or what it was good for. And two of these guys, Laszlo Hanwitz and Jeremy Sturdivant, decided to do a little experiment. They said, Laszlo said, I'm going to pay you basically Bitcoin to have a couple pizzas delivered to my house. So they settled on the somewhat arbitrary number of 10,000 Bitcoin, which Laszlo sent to Jeremy. Jeremy had pizzas delivered, and everybody was thrilled when they took pictures and shared it on the message boards. Well, today those pizzas would be worth $100 million. So don't feel so badly about spending a couple $100s in Bitcoin, because those were some expensive pizzas. But what they did was they really showed that these digital assets have real world value, and they kind of kickstarted this whole $250 billion asset class. And so from that perspective, what they gave to the world was incredibly valuable, and maybe they got a deal.
And so when so Bitcoin is based on blockchain, and that sort of kicked off all the other currencies. When did Bitcoin come about originally?
That was about 10 years ago was when that was first proposed.
And so, as the market has sort of grown, and now the uses and potential ideas that blockchain can do is really expanding as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what happened very quickly was everyone saw, well, once these pizzas showed that Bitcoin had real world value, the price increased like tenfold overnight, and it was still only worth, 8 cents per Bitcoin. But then people started buying it, and the value started going up and up and up. And before long, it just started taking off like a rocket. Well, people said, why should Bitcoin be the only the only digital currency out there? Remember, Bitcoin is open source, which means it's free to copy the code and create your own alternative to Bitcoin. That's why we call them altcoins. Some people call them cryptocurrencies, but dozens of these new altcoins were launched overnight. And most of them failed, but some of them did attract a community of believers, and many are still around today. So very quickly, we saw dozens of new altcoins really kicking off this whole new asset class. Now, today, we have companies like Facebook just partnered with MasterCard, Visa, Uber, Lyft, PayPal, eBay, a ton of other technology companies to launch this new cryptocurrency called Libra, still in the planning stages, but you've probably heard about that. So that's Facebook. That's a major entrant. Telegram is one of the biggest social media sites out there. They are launching their own cryptocurrency, their own altcoin. We have huge investment banks like JP Morgan. It has launched their own currency as well. So it's really starting to go mainstream now, with very large players realizing, wait a minute, we can kind of mint our own money. We can kind of create our own digital asset and start capturing that value right now.
And what was the draw for you? Why did you send money to get Bitcoin from Bulgaria or wherever you were getting it from?
Well, at the time I saw it as an investment, and I saw, boy, this is something that could really become very quite valuable in the future. I was right about that. But what I've come to understand since writing this book is what we're doing is creating a global money. We're creating one money for one world. We live in a global economy, and we need a global currency. And whether that's Bitcoin or whether that's one of these other new blockchain-based digital assets, it is inevitable that this is what will happen. That's the single most exciting technology that we can be involved with in this lifetime. I mean, that's something that's going to last for hundreds of years. And so being part of that and being able to tell that story, tell that narrative about the early days of this technology and all these crazy pioneers that have started off this new revolution, that's enormously exciting.
And what is your role in all of this exactly? How do you see yourself?
Well, I'm making it accessible. So the idea behind blockchain for everyone was that a lot of the blockchain books out there, most of them were very geeky. They were kind of written by, computer geeks for other computer geeks. And I started falling asleep when I read them, and I'm interested in this stuff. So by like chapter 3, I was zoned out. And I realized we need to tell a compelling story about this. So I actually wrote this book twice, Derek. And the first time I wrote this book, I wrote it as a series of essays, basically describing all the building blocks of blockchain, how it works, Bitcoin, all these new cryptocurrencies, altcoins, and so forth. And I gave it to my editor, who's the great Jeremy Ruby Strauss over at Simon & Schuster. I trust him completely. He's had a number of New York Times bestsellers, really smart guy. Jeremy reads through my first manuscript and he says, well, this is how he talks. He goes, well, the first section, there are 4 sections. He goes, the first section is pretty good. The second section needs a little work. Third section, you should probably rewrite completely. And the fourth section, just get rid of it. And I'm like, thank you for your honesty. Through gritted teeth, I'm saying this. And I read it again, and I was like, he's right. He's right. Because what I was trying to do was, again, talk about it from a very theoretical standpoint, how this blockchain works. And I realized what we have to do is tell a story. We've got to make it like a movie, like a hero's journey. This has got to be like a Star Wars, Lord of the Rings type epic journey where the hero leaves a safe, comfortable home and goes out in search of adventure and meets foes that he has to slay, and he finds spiritual helpers, and he overcomes obstacles, and the sirens are singing the song, but he lashes himself to the mast lest he crash his ships upon the rocks, lured by the siren song of the wonderful virgins. And then at the end, he captures the golden fleece. He defeats the evil Sauron, and he comes back with the boon, with the gift for everyone else. He comes back a changed person. So that's the book I wrote, is a hero's journey, a story, my own story into this realm of blockchain. And I give it to Jeremy, my second manuscript, and he goes, well, we got a page turner. He said, hey, I read the whole book in one sitting, 9 hours, because I never do that, the whole book. And I've had so many people come up to me afterward and go, I read that whole freaking book in one sitting. Like, it's that much of just a page-turning story. So I hope your daughter did as well,
yes,
Derek.
Yeah, gave it to my 9-month-old. And yeah, I'd have to agree. And I think one of the things about it is that in a classic hero's journey, there's a lot of ups and downs. And in your story, there's like you showing up to the global summit and there's 9 people in the audience, or people heckling you, or the price going down or going up, or like such a journey. Where in that hero's journey cycle are you right now? Do you see it as a complete journey, or are you still in the midst of it?
Well, the hero's journey never ends, right? That's why we have more than one Star Wars movie. You kind of go deeper and deeper. But certainly, I went through an entire cycle for the book. There's no question that there was that's the 4 parts of the book are the beginning, the rise, the fall, and the rebirth. And the book really is about reinventing myself, or, this kind of rebirth that I experienced. So I definitely have come out a changed person. I've definitely reinvented myself. But the challenges that I'm facing now and that we're facing as a company are, I would say, bigger and even more ambitious and grand in scope. But the story, I'm very proud of the way that it holds together as a story that people, I think, can really relate to. Somebody read the book and said to me, like, you don't even have to be interested in blockchain to like enjoy this book, because it's just a really good story. But along the way, you end up learning about this like really important technology as well.
Yeah. So you finished writing the book a few months ago. So I'm curious about, because the space is moving so fast, what's the continued evolution for you? I know you have your journal that you write and you have a lot of readers, but yeah, I'm curious, like your direction for your efforts currently.
Yeah, so in the book we leave off with me, having worked very diligently at kind of transforming this company, which I had a small marketing agency, and I bought Bitcoin, as I said in the beginning, and as the price of Bitcoin began to go up, in my excitement, I took the entire company and bet it on this new technology called blockchain. Kind of like if you ever watch like a gambler, like a poker tournament, how they'll all just like go all in with the chips. I kind of did that with the company, and then the price of Bitcoin crashed from $20,000 down to $5,000. The whole market dried up overnight, and trying to survive through that. And then at the end, the market is coming back up, and the company has really evolved. We found a niche, and I'm speaking to very large audiences at that point. That's the story in a nutshell. And today, we're doing more of that. So we have an even bigger roster of blockchain clients. We're really successfully making this transition into blockchain. The book is doing very well. It was an Audible bestseller.
Congrats.
And I'm speaking to even bigger audiences. I'm keynoting at a number of conventions, including World CryptoCon at the end of October. So it's very exciting.
And
I'm here with you.
Yeah.
I'm here with you.
You got the Art of Adventure bump that should be headed your way. And so let's see. I'm curious about your company. Like, did you throw out everything, the media shower, like all the other stuff, and now you're just solely doing the blockchain? And what size is your company, and sort of like what are the little nuts and bolts of that?
Yeah, that's the question that everyone wants to know is like, okay, so what's up with the company now? So we still have a lot of marketing business that we do that's non-blockchain related because the blockchain market at this point is still growing, right? It's still a very young industry. So I would say the proportion, however, of blockchain work to our kind of non-blockchain work is growing and has grown a lot since the end of the book. So we have a fantastic team of writers, journalists, designers, project managers, et cetera, that are putting together content. We're a content marketing agency. And the other exciting thing about our company is that we are co-publishing this book, Blockchain for Everyone. So we have two versions. There's the kind of standard version that's published by Simon & Schuster in North America. And then there's what we call the global edition, which is this yellow cover behind me. And the global edition is being sold everywhere else and published through Media Shower. So it's a really interesting arrangement where we're doing all the international ebook and audiobook versions, and Simon & Schuster is publishing them in North America. They've been a great partner, and I think this is the new publishing model of the future. And the other exciting thing about the global edition is we're also giving away free cryptocurrency with every copy of the book while supplies last. So if you go to blockchainforeveryone.com, you can buy a version of the book that comes with $25 worth of DAI, which is a new stable coin. So the way it works is you sign up for a blockchain wallet at coinbase.com, and it will come preloaded with $25 worth of DAI. And you can use that to buy goods and services on Coinbase, or you can cash it back out into dollars. And since the book is about $25 and you're getting $25 cryptocurrency, it's like you're getting the book for free.
How do those stable coins work? There's one that's stable to the dollar, so it's always worth $1. It seems like the market forces that drive the other coins, how do they keep a coin stable like that?
Yeah, so we'll go back to your earlier question of like, should I have spent that Bitcoin buying meals in Bali? So the idea behind stable coins is that they have a stable value. And as you said, usually they're pegged to the US dollar. So if you hold $1 worth of this DAI, you know that tomorrow when you wake up, it's going to still be worth $1, as opposed to Bitcoin, which you hold it today, it's worth $10,000. Tomorrow it might be $11,000. It might be $9,500. We don't know. So that's the incentive or the hope behind these stable coins is that they maintain their value. Now, your question about how they maintain their value, there's at least half a dozen of these out there today that are all kind of vying for first place. I mentioned the Facebook Libra coin. That is intended to be a stable coin as well. So everyone recognizes, as I said, that we're moving toward a global economy, one money for one world, and everybody wants to be that money. They want to be the US dollar of the new blockchain world. And so some of them are doing it by backing it up with real world value. In other words, for every dollar that you buy of their stable coin, it might be backed up by $1 worth of gold sitting in a vault somewhere. Some of them are backed up by US dollars. So they just say, look, if you've got $1 worth of our currency, we have $1 sitting in a bank somewhere. And some of them are backed up by other blockchain assets. So if you've got $1 worth of a stable coin, it might be backed up by $2, let's say, of Ethereum or some other cryptocurrency. So all these new models are being experimented with. But so far, they've been pretty successful, meaning that a couple of these projects have been out for around a year, and they have successfully held their peg to the US dollar through a very rough market.
And what's the most exciting non-monetary use of blockchain technology for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that what in the book I call smart stocks are really exciting. So, if you go buy a share of a publicly traded company like Apple or Tesla, you're buying a little share of stock. You can get like a little stock certificate if you want, like a little printed piece of paper. And we're talking about basically tokenizing those, which just means instead of sharing it with a little piece of paper and on somebody's like spreadsheet somewhere, we're now storing that on blockchain, which is this kind of decentralized ledger. The whole point of this is that we're going to put ownership, the stock ownership of these companies, into a new technology that's programmable. So we can do smart things like organize shareholder voting better and things like that. And smart stocks are also going to let us own a little bit of many other types of things, like, for instance, professional sports teams. So if you want to own a little bit of the Boston Red Sox, for example, or the real estate like Fenway Park, you'll be able to buy a little bit of that and become an owner. And my story on this is my son, when he was 13, he got some money one year for the holidays. And I said, if you want to, you could invest that. And he ended up buying some Tesla stock. And it changed his life because now he's an owner in that company. And so he follows everything they do. It changes your mental attitude towards something when you're an owner of it. And that's what this is going to let us do, these smart stocks, is become, little owners of all of these bigger things. That's going to give us all more ownership.
Yeah, that's cool. It's skin in the game. I think the Packers already are sort of owned by Green Bay. Yeah. It seems like they might be the first to want to use this.
Absolutely. And I think that's the model of the future, is the Packers.
You mentioned voting, and I think you talked about it in your book. It would be really cool. We have this sort of archaic election process in the U.S. And it's not super transparent about what's actually going on. It seems like there's potential to just have the elections feel more fair and open, even in our own country in the U.S., but also around the world. Like, what do you think about the uses in voting?
Yeah. My colleague Nimit Sahani is a Boston-based entrepreneur, and he founded a company called Voatz, VOATZ. And they're putting voting on blockchain technology. So in plain English, what that means is when you want to vote, you're going to be able to open up a smartphone app, and you're going to be able to record your vote right there. And it's going to go onto a transparent blockchain where we'll all be able to see not necessarily what I voted, but we'll be able to see all the votes in aggregate. So we, the people, the citizens, will be able to audit the results of elections ourselves. And their technology has already been used in, I think, 40 different elections. They're very small scale tests at this point. But for example, absentee ballots, they recently did a test with, I think, the state of West Virginia, where they were able to, tally the results of all the absentee ballots using their technology, which was maybe a couple hundred votes. But still, that's how we get these things started, is with very small scale tests, show them as proof of concepts, and eventually that's just the way it will be done.
Yeah, it's super, super exciting. I think about that, or I've heard one of the reasons why communism sort of failed was because it was too slow. Like, you had to send all this stuff sent to Moscow in Russia, and then sort of like redistribute it. And so all this time to send stuff into the middle and then redistribute it. And it almost feels like our government is very similar in how, it is much slower than a blockchain-based technology. And so I kind of hope that they sort of adopt some of this stuff to keep pace with sort of the rest of the economy.
Yeah, exactly. So we started by talking about the slowness of sending money, right? So that is another example where it's very inefficient at something that needs to be very efficient. And I think voting and just kind of getting citizen feedback, you're right, is another area that's very inefficient. It's kind of mired in government bureaucracy. And by doing this, we can kind of get rid of or go around centralized institutions, creating these new infrastructures that are going to be much faster, much more efficient. and that's going to change the world. This stuff is inevitable. Like, it is going to happen. The question is, what is the role of government in these new models? So does the government want to be left behind? Do they want revolution, or do they want to embrace these new technologies? Do they want evolution? And that's a lot of what I talk about in the book is it evolution or is it revolution? And where are we on that continuum? And my own answers, you can hear in the book, kind of vacillate back and forth. Try revolution and see that's actually, there's a lot of problems with that, but try evolution and see, well, it's kind of slower than we would like sometimes. So we got to work with the government, and yet at the same time, the government's got to work with us.
And are we still in the sort of early adopter phase? Like, if we use the analogy of the .com boom and bust, it feels similar in terms of like invest opportunity.
Yeah.
And the early adopter is then sort of like the broader mass appeal. Like, where are we in that sort of curve of people actually using blockchain?
Yeah, well, the very first chapter of the book is me talking about the .com days, and I started my career in 1995. I worked at this technology media company, and I was kind of the funny technology writer. I was the comedy writer that also kind of understood the internet, and I was able to make it really useful and user-friendly. And our company went public, and on my 30th birthday, I was a millionaire. I was what they called a paper millionaire, where I had earned stock options worth $1 million. And that was during the height of the .com boom. That was like 1999, 2000. And then shortly after that, of course, the .com crash happened, the bubble burst, and everything kind of went downhill. But today's most powerful companies, the Amazons and the Googles of today, were formed in that initial 5-year period, that 1995 to 2000 period. And today, the same thing is happening in blockchain. And I tell that story at the beginning to kind of draw the parallels that is where we are today in this new technology of blockchain, except that it seems to be moving even faster because there's more money at stake. Because, money is the very technology that we're dealing with. So it's moving even faster than that. We call it blockchain time. It's like 7 times human time. But that idea of sort of early adoption, it very much feels like where we are today.
So at this point, people like my parents have heard about Bitcoin and blockchain but haven't done anything to participate in it. For a lot of those people, how do they dip their toe into this? Like, what is, because it's inevitable, right? I assume like getting earlier understanding will be more helpful. So what's a sort of person who's still sitting on the sidelines? How do they enter this world?
Yeah, well, the easiest thing they can do is just buy a little bit of Bitcoin. Just get a little bit of skin in the game, even if it's $100. You can use a service like Coinbase.com to go buy a little bit. The process of buying it will itself be instructive. You can also buy a copy of Blockchain for Everyone that comes with $25 worth of cryptocurrency. And again, our idea behind that is really to get this stuff into the hands of as many people as possible. That's why we call it Blockchain for Everyone, because we want it in the hands of everyone. And then once you get a little bit of ownership, again, like my son owning Tesla stock, suddenly it takes on a new light. Suddenly you're very interested in this, and you start to think like, well, what is the nature of money? And why do we trust the dollar? And what gives a currency its value? And all of these very interesting ideas will start percolating and circulating throughout your brain. And that's probably the best way to start getting involved. And just like you buying your first Bitcoin in Bali, you'll have a little story to share.
Yeah, I remember that it was a very delicious hamburger that I ate with that Bitcoin. Yeah,
it was a $10,000 hamburger, but tasty. Did you get fries? Did you get a side?
I think I got fries, sweet potato fries. Yeah.
Yeah, those are good.
So I'm curious, what aspects of your former iterations of your life, the comedy, the fasting, the mind hacking, like how does this all fit in with who you are at the moment?
Yeah, I really at its heart, this is a book about reinvention, and I'm a big believer, Derek, that the world moves so fast, technology moves so fast that we are called on to be lifelong learners. We don't have one career anymore. We have many careers. We have many careers, right? We have many careers. And in order to kind of meet the demands of a world that's accelerating, we have to constantly be adding to our skill stack and finding ways of reinventing the skills that we already have to meet the new demands. And that's really what I've done in the book, is a story, my personal story, but also the story of our company, how we reinvented our company. But we're kind of a snapshot of the larger story, which is reinventing the world economy and the way that this technology is reinventing the world of money. So we're kind of the microcosm, and blockchain is the macrocosm. But what I found along the way in this process of reinvention, it was really difficult, but I'm so grateful now that I had these skills. I had the stack, I had the ability to write. I had the ability, the comedy writing. I had the ability to make this stuff accessible and interesting and funny because I had put in my 10,000 hours of work in a previous career doing that. I had this sort of bigger picture that I was able to tap into from doing things like the fasting experiment, which really do open you up to a different perspective on the world. So I was able to see this technology is not just about Bitcoin. This technology is about reinventing the world economy. I was able to see that sort of spiritual dimension of things. So all these things that I was able to bring to the table, I was able to make it more rich and more useful for people. And I think all your listeners are the same way. You have a set of skills that you can bring to bear on whatever it is that you do next.
How did the fasting, maybe you could say more explicitly, how does doing a big fast like you did play into being a good blockchain journalist?
That is a question that I've never been asked. I love that question. Well, you've done a number of fasts. I'm correct, yes. Derek, right? Yeah. We've talked about that. Yeah. And you can attest that when you are fasting, you are in touch with another level of reality or another kind of dimension of being that's always there, but you're just not aware of it in everyday life. Is that a fair assessment?
Sure, yeah, it's a big frame shift.
It absolutely is a mental shift that is difficult to describe if you haven't done it. And I just did a 3-day fast recently, just before my book came out, to kind of prepare. And I was just reminded, because I kind of went into that zone again, and I'm like, there's something really profound about that state, that I see connections between things that I would normally miss or dismiss. Like I might have these kind of ideas, but I might just sort of brush them off as imaginary, but somehow they seem more real when you're fasting. There seems to be an element that is much more tangible when you're in that zone. That's the best way I can describe it without actually having somebody do it. But that process of having gone through that, like that was one of the most profound experiences. I'm talking about my long fast that we talked about last time I was on.
A month?
Which was 21 days. And it was one of the most profound experiences of my life, truly, because I was so deeply in that state that I just recognized and realized things about the world with a newfound kind of profundity, that I was able to bring some of those learnings back and actually put them into action in my everyday life. And I would say that like where I ended up going with this was in large part, like this whole book came about in large part because of those changes that I went through as part of that long-term fast.
And there were certain times in the book where you're, surrounded by Swiss bankers or people with, you're at the Fed or, people with gravitas, influence, and perhaps intimidating. And I couldn't help but draw parallels between like you trying to prank the Super Bowl or impersonating Michael Jackson, and sort of maybe this sense of courage or bravery or whatever to like place yourself in this unfamiliar situation.
Yeah.
So the underlying part of my question here is like, if someone were to become an expert on a brand new technology and then try to tell people about it, a lot of people would face the like, who am I to talk about this? The imposter syndrome. Yeah. So did you face that? And did you draw from your previous?
Yeah. That's a really insightful question. I really appreciate that question because you're right. There is something that's very similar as a parallel between these crazy, outrageous stunts that we did, where we were often putting ourselves in great, physical danger sometimes, and certainly kind of emotional or psychic danger, right? And now, going in front of, speaking at the Fed or in front of these Swiss bankers, as you said, where I'm now presenting myself as an expert. And I don't have a background in finance. I don't have a career in like investing. And I'm telling them about this new technology. And there is a sense of like imposter syndrome, like who am I? And you do have to kind of claim it or own it. You kind of have to pretend. And in that way, it's very much like the pranks that we used to do, where we're, getting ourselves into the Super Bowl. And that was sort of putting on a character. It was kind of acting our way as if we belonged backstage and, going through TSA and all this extremely high security. Very similar kind of idea, except now I'm as myself, putting myself out as an expert out there in front of these, high-powered finance guys, mostly guys. And I think that with all of that, there comes a sense of once you make it through, you have earned the right to go and do it again. So that what I look at now when I go out and speak to these audiences is like, I have earned the right to be here because I've paid my dues. I have done all of this work beforehand. I've dealt with the hecklers at the Rotary Club. I've gone to the Global Blockchain Summit where 9 people showed up and one of them was a nightmare. I've done all of I put in my time. And I've written this book twice. And because I've put in all that time, I am an expert. And I think your listeners can do the same thing where you got to own it. And so you have to like say, you know what, I've done the time here and I'm going to own this. That does not mean I am the only expert in the world. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to listen to other points of view. To the contrary, I'm going to try to enlarge my own knowledge, but I am going to own it. This is who I am, and this is my space, and I am an expert.
I just had the idea of, because I think you shared the story of like an artist. I'm trying to remember who it was, a musical artist, sort of allowing people to buy shares in his. Was it David Bowie that you could buy shares? Yeah. Well, like, could you buy? You could create a blockchain or a currency to buy shares in someone's expert status. Kind of like how Amanda Palmer, did with crowdfunding. You could sort of crowdfund the future of your career as a thought leader in a certain space.
Yes, I think that's going to be inevitable. So I was speaking in South Korea at this blockchain convention a couple months ago, and I had this idea that I thought I was making up as a cool example. And I said, imagine, K-pop is all the rage in South Korea. And I said, imagine if you were able to buy a share of a K-pop band. So in other words, what you're buying is a little piece of ownership in their future earnings and their future royalties. So what they get out of it, it's almost like they're fundraising for a startup company. Like what they get out of it is all these people buying in at the beginning. So they get this big initial influx of cash that they can then put into, producing a new album or going on tour or whatever. And what you get as an investor is a payout of their future royalties, almost like a bond or something like that, or a stock that pays dividends. And so after I gave this talk, this young woman comes up to me and she goes, well, we're actually doing that. She said, we have a company that actually has sold ownership in like 4 K-pop bands to date. And I said, that's beautiful. That's beautiful because that is the future. So going back to the Green Bay Packers, you could own a little piece of a sports team, but you could also own a little piece of Lady Gaga. And earn a little bit based on her future royalties. So this technology is going to make us all owners, and that's exciting.
Yeah, super exciting. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think is important for the listeners to know?
Well, I'd love for folks to get the special edition of the book where they can get the cryptocurrency. That's at blockchainforeveryone.com. And again, when you buy it, you get a little code, and that code will unlock $25 worth of DAI right in your Coinbase wallet account. And I just want to thank our friends at Coinbase and at MakerDAO that creates DAI for basically donating this as part of the launch of this book. They share our mission of getting blockchain into the hands of as many people as possible. And blockchain for everyone is what it's all about.
Super. John, yeah, thanks for coming on. It's always fun. I'm going to be watching to see how your involvement in all this evolves. I'm sure it'll be exciting.
That's the fun part, isn't it? It's kind of like what happens next is sort of the sequel to the book. Like real life is the sequel to this book. That's what I love about it.
And could you share one of your best sort of blockchain related puns or jokes?
My best blockchain related puns or jokes.
Because I feel like there's got to be an H&R blockchain to spring up.
Yeah, well, my son, he's about to turn 18, and he said, I said, what would you like for your birthday? Big birthday. He said, well, I'd like a Bitcoin. And I said, $10,000. I don't know, $11,000 is a lot of money. You sure? $9,500? That's kind of a one you have to think about, and you have to follow the market to actually get that joke.
Because it's going up and down.
Thank you. When you have to explain the joke, Derek, I think we can agree probably not the best.
Well,
I'll work on my jokes and puns for next time.
Okay, good. Yeah, we'll do a special edition of the show, the joke episode. John, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to catch up. Great to have you on.
Derek, thank you so much for all the work you do on this podcast. And a reminder to everybody, Derek puts in a lot of time and love into the art of adventure. So please go rate him, like him, share him. And that's all you have to do as your payment for this fantastic podcast he puts together.
Let me hold up the.
Really
also, this is the U.S. version of the book, which orange is my favorite color, so that's always a bonus.
Orange is the new black, I heard.
Oranges are the new black. I don't know. All right, let's wrap there before we try to make any more jokes up. All right, John, thanks again.
Thanks, Derek.
Great episode with John Hargrave. Thank you so much for listening all the way through to the finish. Really exciting technology. And if you're not already holding some of these coins, some of these currencies, hopefully it's inspired you to get some skin in the game, to go out there and either purchase his book and get the $25 in currency, or just go on Coinbase and buy $100 of Bitcoin or something else. This is what I'm encouraging my family to do, is to get some skin in the game, start tracking and seeing how you use the technology, because it's so new. This will develop. We will see its potential more apparent over the years. So if you found this helpful or useful and you like to be helpful as well, then please share it with your friends and family. You can share it with them with a link, post it on social media, and we can spread the word. And that's how trust in this technology, that's how trust in money is brought about, is by people actually using it and understanding it. So if you have questions for myself or John, please send us an email. Let us know what you learned. Let us know what you're excited about, what questions you still have about blockchain technology. My email is derek@derekloudermilk.com. Likewise, you can email me there if you are curious about working together. I'm a business coach for high performers and entrepreneurs. So if you are interested in taking your business or your life to the next phase, to the next level, increasing your income, your productivity, your enjoyment, your fulfillment, all of those things are involved in coaching. So you can email me about that, and we can connect and see if that's a possibility. So on a personal note, would love for you guys just to share this with other people. I think we can help get this information out. I do this show for free because I love doing it, and I love helping other people who want to know about all these things that we're learning about. So if you could take 5 minutes and leave a rating and review in iTunes or whatever podcasting platform you listen on, then that helps other people learn about whether they should listen to the show or can suggest the show to them in their podcasting feed. So the other people like you that are interested in this stuff can learn about it and can listen to these episodes. So let's help everyone learn together. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to the episode. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.